Yeah, whales will be whales. I mean, the whales. I mean, for them to click in stake and pay $1,600, that doesn't like that means nothing to them. It's like me finding a dollar on the floor, right? They don't care. Whales are going to not care about that. But the narrative that I've seen in Pulse Chain and in the Pulse Chain community is that they're shifting to PX simply based on because Pulse Chain was created because of the gas fees, right? That's why it was created in the very beginning, was because Richard said the gas fees were unsustainable. And I think people just ran with that, but they just don't take that one variable into account. And I think if you ask many people in this community why they think Pulse Chain Hex is going to do better, they're just going to say because it's cheaper. So I just think people need to understand that EX isn't dying and whales are going to play on Ethereum regardless of what we do as retail.
I 100% agree with you, and you are 100% right. Pulsechain was created because Ethereum had so high transaction costs, but I think now it became something bigger. Now it became the decentralized platform that is not centralizable, but we do not have a foundation. We do not need to bow down to the government and do whatever they're saying because it is decentralized. Ethereum, on the other hand, though, they have a little bit of a hard time because they have their foundation, in my point of view. And right now we
100%.
have 3 Commas Capital up, and I'm really excited to hear what his opinion is on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that Ethereum fees don't actually have to come down as precipitously as people might say. I don't think that EX or PHEX should win. So I think they'll both be around, but I just don't think that Ethereum's fees have to come down simply because a lot of people have been saying that the fees are just going to shift to a more collective model in terms of L2s. So, L2s are just going to start paying for them. So on Ethereum, you're going to start competing with, collectives of people, on these L2s. And you'll be fighting with individuals on Pulse Chain. And it just comes with trade-offs fighting those two different battles. But it's not necessarily that one is going to be dominant or the right move at any point in time.
100%, I agree with you.
I think the transactions did go down.
Well, because the bear market and nobody was using crypto anymore, right? But in the bull run, it will go higher.
The transaction fees actually did go down.
Are you talking about from the recent merge?
No, yeah, like just in general, because like I remember like back in the day, the price of ETH, not the price in like dollar terms, but like just how much ETH I would be charged on a transaction with the Gwei, and like 32, like between like what 14 like to 30 Gwei is pretty. I'd say it's pretty low. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, I mean that's based off the status of the market, though.
And I agree with Commas too, because like the idea that Ethereum is not going to do well when Ethereum did its best performances at the highest peaks of its transaction cost. So like, at the same time too, as an old ETH guy, I do want you to pay $10,000 for a transaction. Like I do want you to pay to have something valuable on this chain.
Yeah, because that indicates security, right? I mean, that like if you're paying more, that means that there's more economic security that is securing the network, which is a good thing. So,
and since the beginning, it was never the goal to have to like. I know they say it, but like,
yeah. So
no one wanted that.
Yeah. So basically, what that means is that it's just going to shift to L2s. It's just a question of how quickly that happens for Pulsechain, and Pulsechain will be able to, leapfrog with Ethereum's tech again. As L2s sort themselves out and we figure out which one's the best, if it's ZK with, just a single proof providing state, or if it's, people being able to create a myriad of chains using some other L2 or some other future L2 that we find out that works in the future. So, it's good that we have this, separate state that can, take on anything that happens with Ethereum. But it's just not clear which side the winner is going to be from the Hex perspective. So I'll let other people step in because I think Gary wants to check.
I think the ratios stay pretty tight, to be honest.
I think there's only a ratio, and sorry, Gary, I know you have your hand up, but I think the ratio is only there because you've extended the liquidity to an extent where people want there to be dominance between each other. Because if you go look, at Pulsex, and then you go look at the liquidities, it's pretty liquid between a Hex and Hex between Pulse. So like, the people want that to occur. So like like anything you can make, like you can bring PDI to $1 if you want. Doesn't mean it's $1. So like, I just feel like people don't see it as just code. They see it as a token and dollars, where they still haven't seen. They don't see it as a mechanism to go and get dollars, right? And the thing is that you could run this code on either or. So you need to figure out how you could use either or and make money off of it. It's a shame that like people are wanting to compare it when it's in reality it does the same fucking thing on each side. So like, yeah, it's just to me, I don't get it.
Let's go to Gary.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys making the commentary. It was something really, these are just thought experiments. All these things are thought experiments. So one thing I'll take the devil's advocate and counterpoint is I don't think that Pulsechain truly was created or pitched for lower transaction costs. I think that's the most palatable, the most marketable, that's got the most support to say that that's the reason. But like the thing, my pushback would be the thing that upset Richard the most, he made the most commentary about, was 12x the S load when it wasn't required, where there was penalty basically to smart contracts that used function of and computational math on Ethereum versus trading a meme coin. So he didn't like that, and I think that the palatable thing, instead of saying, hey, we're going to move to, as a community, we're going to have social consensus, we're going to go over to this other EVM, such as Tron or something else, as a community. Or, I've heard this thing of ETH proof of work, or let's all move to ETH Classic, because transaction costs are really what's killing you guys, right? That was never a pitch. So part of the ego element, control element, responsible for the financial direction of the community, whatever you want to say is positive framing that Richard or Greg the Duck made. That's what came about. So I think it's actually because if there's going to be changing code, it's not beholden to the foundation. I haven't seen a Pulsechain Foundation narrative. I haven't seen anything as far as like what will be spliced in, what won't be spliced in, what devs have core admin key responsibility, for Pulsechain itself. You can see it on GitHub, and you can say, oh, well, this is Brett Tepp, and this is this other guy that's an unknown, and this other guy, and oh, by the way, Richard Hart signed in as someone giving these permissions and taking them away. We see that on chain. But like at the end of the day, the pitch for its lower transaction cost was, to me at least, just palatable. It was just the easiest thing to make the pitch to the community to support, where ultimately it is about control and control of what code is considered risky to splice in to an L1, what code is off the shelf and not considered as risky, such as the bridge elements that have admin key and things like that too. Like we've all absorbed that because of the social capital that Richard had built over time. And his social brand is really the social consensus that supports any of these three products specifically. So I don't think it's transaction cost. And I say that also because real estate has a minimum of 5 to 8% transaction cost. You want to buy a house, you want to buy a commercial building, you're going to have transaction costs to get in and out of that. Silver and gold, if you want to buy an ounce of gold, you're going to pay between 50 to 80 bucks just in transaction cost. That's simply the premium for above and beyond the spot of the gold itself. So like you have transaction costs that really aren't addressed in other things, in other commodities, just because it's part of the distribution of how the end consumer receives the commodity or good. We accept that there are people that have wholesale price. We accept that we pay retail price. Like it's just part of distribution. So like, does it need to be 10 cents in order to be competitive with Ethereum's 50 bucks? Sure, as long as it's marketable, as long as there's more people interested to participate than not, sure, it's a good marketing point. But people buy supercars that are millions of dollars and they pay transaction costs of $30, $40, $50,000 in order to do so. So like transaction cost in and of itself, no, I don't agree. Ethereum still has that mantle. There are still people that are running hedge funds and have, ETF products that they're going to earn a 2%, fee basically of their consumer base to manage. And they don't care about they don't care about transaction costs because it's absorbed by their endpoint, and it all depends on the marketing for Ethereum as an ETF, holding. So that's the two things. One is I don't think it had anything to do really with transaction costs. There were other options that were available. There still are options on Ethereum to have a low transaction cost chain or product. Second is, I think that it's interesting that we don't have a foundation. I'm not saying that as a FUD point. I'm just saying it's just interesting that we don't know who actually has choice and decision making. We assume it's Richard, but it may not be Richard. It may be a foundation. It may be this OA that may be hundreds of multi-sig addresses to make a decision. We do not know. So we're in the blind, and there's not necessarily harm with that as long as we still have the social consensus integrity to believe that Richard is a good steward for the community.
That's a very good, well-articulated point, Gary. I appreciate that. It gives me something to think about. Thank you for that, man.
Just thought experiments. Nothing negative, nothing positive.
No, you made very valid points.
I agree that would be, Gary, I think that would be the best approach, because I think for forever, everyone's always been trying to do the ETH killer as to do like the ETH helper. And like in 2022, I was so sure that L2s were going to do so well, better than what they performed. But I think it's the ability to build on top of the EVM, which was one of the key components that like ETH really wanted to highlight at the beginning. Also, it's like, hey, you can do this, Polkadot and ADA, wanted to go on their own way, but other people chose to do other things. And I feel like what Pulsechain is trying to do is not necessarily help, but it's not necessarily trying to destroy it, but it's mimicking it while giving it an option. Because the beauty about always having those options to go in different places to ARB or different places to it was always the options that was very beautiful. Sometimes in crypto, it was like, hey, there's a new option here, there's a new option. And it's cool that Pulsechain is basically the other option of ETH. So a lot of people need to see the beauty in that, where it's like, hey, you have the same thing, but better. And who knows what might happen? Like the transactions might get to a point where we're looking at it like, yeah, it's expensive to transact, but who cares? We're the first ones to buy, where that's how people feel in ETH too. It's like, well, I have a couple thousand ETH, so a thousandth of an ETH is not much for me to transact. So let me go ahead and buy. So yeah, I feel like Pulsechain was designed so much better than just killer, because everyone failed, because it's like, why do you want to kill something that's gonna help you? It was always weird how people would always phrase it like, oh, BNB ETH killer, AVAX ETH killer.
It's funny. Hey, it's funny you say that, because I don't know if you guys played video games, but I used to play a lot of them. Back in the day, all the MMOs, their whole narrative was, we're going to be the World of Warcraft killer. You know what? None of them ever did it. So, it kind of makes sense. Like, that's actually like exactly what happened with MMOs. And I wouldn't necessarily advertise Pulsechain as an ETH killer. I don't think that's a very good narrative.
You could do it, but there would be no point.
Well, I like it a lot when I go to pulsechain.com that it says that Pulsechain is helping Ethereum to reduce the transaction fees, right? I think that's a great point there. That's a very good selling point, and that's probably how Richard wants it to be as well.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like an attack, Like, it doesn't feel like abrasive when you say it like that.